The order was delivered after sunset, when the palace corridors had fallen silent, and only a handful of senior aides remained inside.
Yes.
Prince William had made his decision. Queen Camilla was to surrender every piece from Queen Elizabeth's secret Sapphire collection before midnight. No delay, no negotiation. What appeared to be a dispute over royal jewels was, in truth, a confrontation over inheritance, loyalty, and who now had the authority to protect the late monarch's most private wishes. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William stood inside a palace office as his equerry placed the inventory before him. An equerry is a senior royal aide trusted with personal duties and sensitive instructions. The prince read the final page twice, removed his glasses, and let the silence stretch. Then he spoke. "Every piece comes back tonight." The order transferred the collection into the custody of the Prince of Wales and the Royal Archive, the secure department responsible for preserving family records and historic possessions. Elizabeth had built the hidden collection across decades. She kept the sapphire necklace, matching bracelet, 2 historic brooches, and diamond-edged tiara apart from the crown jewels, the ceremonial treasures held for the nation rather than owned personally. These sapphires were family heirlooms, valued for the wishes attached to them. One sealed velvet case carried the greatest mystery. Nobody outside a tiny circle knew which jewel rested inside, or why the late monarch protected it so fiercely. Camilla received the demand while preparing for dinner. Her aide entered, delivered the instruction, and explained that access to the collection room had been restricted. The queen consort's expression hardened. She insisted that King Charles had allowed her to retain the sapphires, and believed his permission settled the matter. Yet William rejected that defense. A private promise, he declared, could not cancel Elizabeth's instructions or turn guarded heirlooms into personal rewards. Charles learned of the order minutes later. The king stood beside his desk, reading the same lines his wife had received. He did not defend Camilla. He did not challenge his son. His silence left her exposed, and she understood that the monarch's hesitation had shifted power. William's decision had not begun with an argument over jewelry. Something inside the inventory had been discovered. Something serious enough to convince him that Camilla had crossed a boundary Elizabeth deliberately created. Behind her locked dressing room door, the sapphire case remained untouched while officials waited outside. But to understand why William was prepared to confront the queen consort so directly, the personal stakes behind the sapphires had to be exposed. To William, the sapphires were not decorations. They were fragments of his grandmother's memory, protected through decades of political change and private heartbreak. To Camilla, however, possession of the collection represented something equally powerful: acceptance. She had spent years standing beside Charles, while the shadow of the past followed her into every palace room. Now, one locked case had placed those 2 emotional truths on a collision course. Neither of them was willing to escape. William returned to the handwritten inventory and studied the initials. Queen Elizabeth II had signed it years earlier, long before anyone imagined the collection would divide her family. The late monarch had been more than a sovereign to him. A sovereign is the ruling king or queen, but to the prince, she had also been the grandmother, who taught him that duty could survive grief, scandal, and disappointment. Elizabeth had worn the sapphires on rare family occasions. William remembered dinner when she fastened a brooch to her dress, and laughed with him away from cameras and ceremony. Those memories made the jewels feel human. They carried the warmth of the woman behind the crown, not merely the authority of the monarch. When he saw that one item had been moved without approval, his fingers tightened around the page. Camilla understood the collection through a different wound. The queen consort, the king's wife, believed wearing Elizabeth's private jewels would prove that she had finally become part of the monarchy's story. Years earlier, Charles had spoken to her during a conversation preserved in his household notes. He told her she should never again feel like a visitor within royal life. She had carried those words ever since, and now they supported her refusal to surrender the case. Charles felt the pressure closing around him. The king understood his son's devotion to Elizabeth, but he also knew how deeply his wife feared being pushed back into the role of an outsider. His silence protected neither of them. It only allowed resentment to grow. Catherine watched William prepare for the confrontation, and sensed the pain beneath his control. The princess warned him that justice without compassion could become another kind of cruelty. He answered that compassion could not mean ignoring a dead monarch's instructions. Stewardship, the duty of protecting something for the future, had to apply even to the queen consort. Camilla lifted one sapphire brooch from its case and held it in her palm. Her anger faded into sadness. Surrendering it would feel like surrendering the acceptance she believed she had earned. The conflict had become painfully personal, yet one concealed palace record would soon show that someone had misunderstood Elizabeth's true intention. 3 weeks before the surrender order, a private banquet at Windsor Castle appeared to proceed without incident. The guests smiled, the speeches remained restrained, and every ceremonial detail seemed perfectly controlled. Then Camilla entered wearing a sapphire brooch that had not appeared in public for more than 40 years. William recognized it immediately. His grandmother had once shown him that jewel in private, and had attached one uncompromising condition to its future. That night, the prince realized the condition had been broken. William stopped speaking beside Catherine the moment the jewel caught his attention. The Windsor Commonwealth Preservation Banquet, a private event honoring nations linked through the Commonwealth, had been designed to display calm unity. Instead, one brooch shattered that message. He turned to a nearby aide and asked who had authorized its release. The aide hesitated, and the pause told him more than any answer could. Camilla noticed his stare as she crossed the room. The queen consort touched the sapphire once, slowly and deliberately, before continuing forward. That gesture carried confidence, but it also showed that she understood the jewel's meaning. The sovereign's promise brooch had never belonged to her normal collection. It had remained inside a sealed private vault after Elizabeth's death, marked restricted until a future family transfer. William waited until the banquet ended before confronting the keeper of the royal collection. The keeper is the official responsible for protecting and recording royal art, jewels, and historic objects. Inside a side chamber, the prince demanded the release record. The official admitted that the case had been opened after a verbal instruction connected to Charles's household. William asked one question. Had the king signed anything? The keeper lowered his eyes and answered no. No written authorization existed. Catherine listened in silence when William later explained why the brooch mattered. Elizabeth had reserved it for the future queen who would stand beside him, intending it to pass eventually to the princess as a symbol linking one reign to the next. She did not ask for the jewel. Yet she understood that Camilla's choice had crossed a personal and constitutional boundary. Charles faced his son the following morning. The king admitted that he had allowed his wife to examine the sapphires, but he denied giving permission to wear the restricted piece. Camilla insisted she had understood his words as approval. William believed she had used that uncertainty because she expected no challenge. Then the investigation uncovered something worse. An envelope listed in Elizabeth's sapphire inventory was missing, and the trust collapsed with it. Once William discovered that the brooch had crossed the palace doors without written authority, a private disagreement became an unavoidable confrontation. No advisors were invited. No secretaries waited beside the walls. When William entered Camilla's private sitting room, only the queen consort remained inside, seated beside the locked sapphire case. Between them stood decades of royal history and years of carefully managed family peace. The prince did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He placed Elizabeth's inventory on the table, looked directly at his stepmother, and told her that the collection would leave with him before the night ended. William closed the door and remained standing. The written surrender order rested beside Camilla's teacup, but she refused to touch it. A surrender order is a formal instruction requiring property to be handed over to authorized custody. Her silence forced him to speak again. Every piece. Tonight. The prince kept his voice level, though the restraint made the demand feel even harder. Camilla accused William of using his future kingship to humiliate her. The queen consort said he had waited until Charles was exhausted by family pressure before moving against her. She claimed the order was not protection but punishment, designed to remind her that she would never truly belong. William answered without stepping back. She had worn a restricted heirloom, bypassed the royal archive, and treated Elizabeth's wishes as optional. The archive is the secure system that preserves royal records and historic possessions. His anger weakened for one moment, replaced by sadness. This was not about whether his grandmother accepted Camilla, he said. It was about whether the family could honor limits when nobody was watching. Camilla rose so quickly that her chair scraped backward. She told him Elizabeth had never fully trusted her, and surrendering the sapphires would allow that rejection to continue beyond death. Then she asked whether Catherine had encouraged the demand. William defended his wife at once. The decision was his, and he would not allow the princess to become a shield for anyone's resentment. Camilla unlocked the outer case but kept both hands on the lid. She would not remove a single jewel until William faced his father. The prince began to answer, but the door opened. Charles stood there, alerted by an anxious aide. The king saw the case, the inventory, and the distance between them. He asked both to stop. William said stopping would make every written rule meaningless. Camilla demanded that her husband choose whether she belonged inside his family. Charles could not choose. His hesitation cut deeper than any verdict. Camilla closed the case again. The confrontation ended without surrender. But the real struggle had shifted toward the man whose signature could decide the collection's fate, and whose silence had already wounded them both. King Charles possessed the authority to end the dispute with a sentence. He could defend Camilla, overrule William, and declare the sapphires part of the queen consort's private use. Yet authority inside a monarchy is rarely as simple as possession. Waiting inside Elizabeth's archive was a sealed letter written years before her death. Once opened, it would transform Charles from the judge of the conflict into a son confronted by his mother's final and unmistakable command. Charles sat alone with two folders before him. One contained Camilla's written claim of entitlement. The other held William's record of unauthorized access. The sovereign's household, the staff and offices serving the reigning monarch, answered to the king. But the sapphires belonged to a private family trust, a legal arrangement created to protect property for chosen heirs, rather than ordinary royal use. Charles opened neither folder. He studied a photograph of Elizabeth wearing the sapphire tiara, and felt the conflict close around him. His mother's wishes stood on one side. His wife's dignity stood on the other. William, as heir, carried responsibility for property reserved for the next reign, especially objects linked to Catherine and the future continuity of the crown. Princess Anne entered carrying a sealed archive envelope. The Princess Royal, the title traditionally given to the monarch's eldest daughter, told her brother that Elizabeth had placed the letter in her care. A documented archive instruction required Anne to release it only if the sapphires became the subject of a family dispute. Charles broke the wax seal and read in silence. His shoulders dropped when he reached the final paragraph. Elizabeth had ordered the collection to remain intact, protected from personal appropriation, and transferred under William's supervision before his accession, the moment he would formally become king. Anne watched without satisfaction. The letter also stated that a reigning queen could wear selected pieces only with the heir's written consent. Camilla therefore possessed no automatic right to the jewels. The princess warned Charles that protecting his wife from embarrassment now could expose her to a harsher scandal later. Charles felt betrayed by the timing, though the command came from his mother. Elizabeth had anticipated the exact conflict now dividing them. The king signed a custodial transfer, a formal document moving responsibility for property, and authorized William to remove the collection privately, without accusing Camilla of theft. Charles paused before releasing the order. He added one condition: Camilla would hear Elizabeth's letter in full. He knew that hearing it might break the fragile peace forever. The decision had finally been signed, but when she heard the late queen's words, the consequences would strike far deeper than the loss of jewels. At 10:07, two royal archivists entered Camilla's private apartments, carrying empty transport cases. No announcement accompanied them. No accusation was read aloud. Yet every servant in the corridor understood what their presence meant. The queen consort stood beside her dressing table as Elizabeth's sapphires were counted, wrapped, and removed one by one. The surrender William demanded had begun, and each closing clasp sounded like another piece of Camilla's authority being taken with them. Camilla refused to sit as the first case was opened. The custodial transfer, a signed order moving legal responsibility for property, gave William authority to remove the entire collection from her control. Two archivists matched every object against Elizabeth's inventory: the necklace, bracelet, diamond-edged tiara, historic brooches, and sealed inner case. Nothing could leave without being recorded. William watched from across the room while Camilla followed every movement. When an archivist lifted the sovereign's promise brooch from its velvet tray, she asked to hold it once more. The official hesitated. The prince gave a silent nod. Camilla closed her fingers around the sapphire and whispered that she had never intended to steal anything. The queen consort's voice carried more hurt than defiance. William answered that intention could not repair a breach after trust had been damaged. His words were controlled, but they struck with final force. Charles remained near the doorway and never approached his wife. The king's discomfort angered Camilla more than William's firmness, because she believed her husband should have prevented the surrender. Elsewhere in the palace, Catherine declined to receive the sapphires. The princess feared that accepting them immediately would turn another woman's humiliation into her own victory. Anne supervised the paperwork and stopped when she examined the inner case. The Princess Royal, the monarch's eldest daughter, found signs that its seal had already been broken, even though the inventory described it as untouched. Inside rested a sapphire ring and a handwritten note addressed to William. William read the note and went still. Elizabeth's documented words confirmed that she expected resistance when the collection was transferred. Camilla then asked to hear the archive letter in full. Charles read it aloud. The jewels, Elizabeth had written, must serve the monarchy and never become proof of personal rank. Camilla's anger collapsed into wounded silence. For the first time, she understood that the restriction was not created only to reject her. It protected the family from confusing stewardship with ownership. Camilla watched the cases leave, then closed the dressing room door herself, shutting Charles outside with William. The sapphires were gone, but behind that door, she faced a choice that would determine whether the surrender destroyed her or transformed her. For nearly an hour, Camilla remained alone. She dismissed her aides, removed her evening jewelry, and sat in silence beside the empty cabinet where Elizabeth's sapphires had been kept. When the door finally opened, it was not Charles who entered. It was William. No officials stood behind him. No inventories separated them. This time, the prince had not come to demand anything. He had come because both of them understood that possession had never been the deepest wound. William entered without an aide and found Camilla holding the sapphire tray. The queen consort looked exhausted rather than angry. She admitted that she had worn the restricted brooch because she wanted one evening in which nobody questioned whether she truly belonged beside the king. Her confession came through a conversation with no officials present, leaving no distance between her fear and his judgment. William listened before answering. He confessed that seeing the jewel had brought back memories of Elizabeth and a fear that her wishes would slowly disappear as the family entered a new reign. A reign is the period during which a king or queen rules. The prince said every ignored instruction made that loss feel more real. Camilla told him he had judged her as a threat, before asking what she believed Charles had permitted. She said the king's words had sounded like approval. William accepted that he had acted with severity, but he refused to apologize for recovering the collection. Duty, he said, required a boundary. Camilla then asked whether Catherine would wear the brooch. William explained that his wife had refused sapphires until the dispute ended without triumph or humiliation. The answer unsettled her. She had assumed the princess was directing the confrontation, yet Catherine had chosen restraint when personal victory was within reach. Camilla lifted a folded statement from the empty tray. She had written it alone, voluntarily renouncing any future independent claim over Elizabeth's private jewels. A renunciation is a formal decision to give up a right or claim. She signed the page before William and handed him the pen, asking that the record state she surrendered the collection after hearing the late queen's instructions. William agreed to protect her from accusations of theft, though the unauthorized release would remain recorded internally. Camilla told him Elizabeth had prepared him well, because he chose duty even when it made him appear cruel. He answered that the late monarch had also taught him mercy, which was why the surrender would not become a public punishment. They left together, not as close family, but no longer as enemies. Their agreement ended the battle, yet the missing sapphires could not remain unnoticed for long. By morning, the palace had lost control of the silence. A photographer captured the royal archive vehicle leaving through the service gate, and within hours, the sapphire dispute dominated broadcasts across Britain. The story was no longer confined to locked rooms or private inventories. It had become a national argument about William's authority, Camilla's place, and Elizabeth's legacy. Yet one newspaper image would capture the public mood more powerfully than every palace statement released that day. The palace issued a worded statement confirming that private heirlooms had entered archival custody. Archival custody means secure care where historic objects are recorded, protected, and released only under written authority. The message named "No Misconduct," but broadcasters immediately linked the transfer to Camilla's Windsor banquet appearance, and William's growing responsibility for property connected to the next reign. The London Herald transformed suspicion into spectacle. Its front page placed Camilla wearing the sapphire brooch beside William, leaving the palace beneath one brutal headline: "The heir takes it back." Outside Buckingham Palace, a crowd gathered near the gates. Some defended the queen consort and called the order humiliating. Others held photographs of Elizabeth and applauded the protection of her wishes. One broadcaster delivered the sharpest judgment during a recorded morning bulletin. William, she said, was no longer simply preparing to lead. The prince was already enforcing the standards of his future reign. That framing mattered because it made Charles appear trapped between his wife and son, unable to control the inheritance or the public story. Camilla watched the coverage alone at breakfast. When the Windsor image filled the screen, she switched off the television and placed the remote face down. Charles reacted with anger. The king ordered his communications staff to stop the dispute from becoming a public contest over his authority. But every defensive instruction confirmed that the palace had lost control. William refused to release a personal statement. He believed public self-justification would turn stewardship into triumph. Catherine strengthened that position when she attended a charitable engagement without sapphire jewelry. The princess understood that wearing even one blue stone could make Camilla's humiliation appear to be her reward. Anne privately praised Catherine during a documented family call. The Princess Royal warned that symbols become dangerous when worn too soon after a wound. Soon afterward, the palace confirmed that the collection would be catalogued under a transparent family trust, ensuring that verbal permission could never unlock it again. Public anger softened as the story shifted from rivalry to preservation. Once the noise faded, only one question remained. What would become of the sapphires? And what final meaning would the family attach to their surrender? The final decision was made not before cameras, but inside the same private archive, where Elizabeth had once approved the collection's sealed inventory. William stood beside Catherine as the sapphire cases were opened for the last time in the dispute. Camilla and Charles entered together moments later. There would be no further demands, no competing claims, and no hidden permissions. The family had gathered to decide what the jewels would represent, now that possession had nearly torn them apart. William placed the entire collection into the Queen Elizabeth Sapphire Trust. A trust is a legal structure that protects property under written rules and shared oversight, rather than personal control. The prince ordered the necklace, bracelet, tiara, brooches, ring, and sealed notes to remain together, preventing individual pieces from disappearing into separate royal households. Catherine accepted the role of future custodian, meaning the person responsible for protecting the collection for the next reign. The princess would not take possession until William became king, and every use before then required documented approval. Her appointment protected continuity without turning Camilla's surrender into a personal victory. Camilla signed the final renunciation before Charles, William, Catherine, and Anne. The queen consort admitted through the written statement and a private recorded conversation that wearing the restricted brooch had been a mistake. She offered no excuse. Insecurity, she said, had pushed her to seek acceptance from an object that could never truly give it. William answered with restraint. Camilla would not face a public accusation, and nobody would strip away the jewels that legitimately belonged to her. The future king had recovered Elizabeth's collection to protect it, not to punish his stepmother. Charles finally accepted his own failure. The king admitted that his informal permission had encouraged his wife to believe the normal restrictions did not apply. His hesitation had weakened him, but his honesty prevented the wound from becoming permanent. Catherine opened the case holding the sovereign's promise brooch. She did not lift it. The princess closed the lid and said the jewel should remain beside Elizabeth's note until the next reign began. Camilla looked at her and quietly agreed. That single answer ended the struggle over who deserved to wear it. William placed his grandmother's handwritten instruction inside the central case and sealed the collection again. The verdict was final. Royal inheritance could not be ruled by private favors, emotional entitlement, or unrecorded promises. When the archive doors closed, Elizabeth's sapphires belonged to the continuity of the crown. The family had chosen stewardship over possession, mercy over triumph, and legacy over pride. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.